All right, welcome to another edition of the OUinsider.com podcast, where we had a news conference where Lincoln Riley introduced both Jamar Cain and DeMarco Murray, and my man Colin Kennedy, who's on the line, was there for it all. Colin, how you doing?
Doing well. I'm ready to talk some ball, man. Let's get into it.
Right on, brother. So, we could talk about the emoji bombshell, but what was your biggest takeaway from the presser?
I thought what was really interesting to me was the conversation between the media and Jamar Cain when asked what was the process like going to Oklahoma from Arizona State, even though you hadn't spent much time there, and yet you had a pretty strong connection to the program. He essentially said, look, it was really difficult trying to speak with Herm Edwards about leaving. He didn't want to do it. He kept putting it off, and then his wife just forced him to go towards him. Then eventually Herm took him in, said, hey, man, I'm really happy for you and the family. Congratulations. They spoke on it. And then the quote of the day was probably, you can't tell Oklahoma no. So I thought, while DeMarco Murray and the eyeball emoji hilarity was certainly something a lot of people talked about, I thought that was really interesting because Jamar Cain is now leaving a program and leaving a head coach, and he has such a comfortable amount of familiarity. And so with him taking this position with Oklahoma, I'm really excited to see it, and I thought that was probably one of the more standout moments to me from the presser.
That was a good moment, and it was nice to see some personality from both he and DeMarco Murray. And I got to tell you, I thought the personalities would be reversed. I thought Jamar Cain would be the much more diplomatic, humble, I'm here to work kind of guy. DeMarco Murray was obviously that guy. And at least in the pieces that I could put together from the scrum, Jamar Cain was like, no, I'm here to win. I'm here to work. I wanted to coach with Alex, but I am not going to kowtow to anybody because I think the question was put to him, how do you feel about recruiting with the big boys now? And he's like, I've been recruiting against them for my entire career. So not that you're trying to pull my card or anything, but no, I'm good. And I know that I'm good and we're going to be better. And I thought that was really cool to see their personalities come out.
Yeah, that Jamar Cain situation from the scrums, it was really interesting because he just came out and started firing off like he was getting ready to play a game. I mean, he was incredibly emotional, and I love to see that. I mean, that's what this staff is trying to assemble, a group of young, emotional, passionate coaches with a true knack for the game. And one of those stories he told, you mentioned recruiting at the big boys, I thought it was fascinating. He said, I came from the mud in terms of recruiting. Like, you're not going to scare me if you're in Alabama or a Michigan or Ohio State. He told a story where he was at North Dakota State and he'd try and convince kids from Texas or Florida to come to Fargo, and they'd tell him, dude, I'm not playing at a place where it's negative 42 with wind chill, but he'd still drive 7 hours in the car, go talk with the recruit for 20 minutes and drive 7 hours back. Think about the asset that Jamar Cain is now for Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley, Alex Grinch, and the rest of that program. You're getting a guy that is just so determined to accomplish what he believes several doubt that he can do. I think you bring up a great point. His true passion for recruiting and the emotional aura about him, I think is just an incredibly advantageous situation as Cain enters a defense that's heading to the next chapter in this newfound revamped system.
You're 100% correct. I mean, that's one of the points that I've been making about the staff. The ages go from 31 to 47. That is a bunch of young men in this game. Somehow Cale Gundy still wants to go and recruit in the way that he does, but it takes strong knees, strong back. It's long hours. It's also just, hey, did you show up to recruit that kid or not? And we look back and we ask ourselves, did Jay Boulware do enough toward the end? And is that how you lose Jace McClellan to Alabama? And perhaps when you look at this particular staff, that ain't going to happen because they're going to find time to go and see these guys. And I thought you brought up a really good point about Jamar Cain trying to convince these blue chip recruits to come to play FCS football in Fargo, North Dakota in negative 42 degree weather, where he had one of the best defenders in that entire division play for him. I mean, he also has produced talent everywhere he's been. But I liken this to Bill Bedenbaugh when he first got the job at Oklahoma because he was at West Virginia at the time. And one of the things that he said was, Deontay Savage wouldn't take my phone calls to West Virginia. Now I got him. Now I'm going to get kids to take my phone calls. They wouldn't normally take my phone calls. And we've seen what kind of recruiter Beatonbow has been, just year in and year out, just filling the boat
Yeah.
with kids that everybody wants. And that's what it's going to take.
Oh, and you're exactly right. I mean, Jamar Cain is going to provide such an additional edge. And now, as you're mentioning, he has the name brand associated. He can put on that crimson interlocked OU and walk into the home of any prospect in the nation and say, look, man, this is the University of Oklahoma. And when you start talking with me, you're going to only build a stronger connection to what I'm selling. So I'm excited. Before we'll keep getting into the overall view of the staff, I was wanting to shift over to you, RJ, on DeMarco Murray. Was there anything that stood out to you about what he had to say or what he provided during that presser?
He was honest. He had an opportunity there to really play to the crowd and to really make it a storybook kind of how he got back to Oklahoma. But he was very honest about, I knew I wanted to coach. I knew I had a passion to do this. I didn't know the timeline. I'm still a puppy in this profession. There are things that I thought I knew that I didn't. There are things I'm still learning. And the way that that really illustrated for me was when he was asked, when Sumlin reached out to you about taking the job at Arizona, who did you call? I called Jason Witten, which is not what we expected him to say. And then he said, I called Bob Stoops, which is also not what we expected him to say. And then he said about third or fourth phone call was Coach Gundy, Kale, guy he played for, guy that helped recruit him there along with Sumlin when he was, lighting the world up at Oklahoma. That is refreshing to see from a guy who, as I've said and I will continue to say, if anybody did not have to put together a resume to be the next running backs coach at Oklahoma, it's probably DeMarco Murray. And yet and still, the position being open, one, incites him to send those eye emojis. But more than that, he was humble about the opportunity. He understood what it meant to be at Oklahoma as a coach and not as a player. And he kept re-emphasizing and reinforcing what I did as a player, both at Oklahoma and in the NFL, is not a reason to come to OU. That is not a recruiting tool. And that is exactly what I wanted to hear and what many of us who are going to judge DeMarco Murray on the merits of being a coach wanted to hear. Because until then, I was iffy on this hire. Because a star player teaching guys that don't necessarily have his talent has never actually been always a good thing. It's either superstar, right? And you have somebody that can speak their language, but also can teach the fundamentals, and there's nothing that person can't do. Or you have a Bill Russell situation when he was coaching the Celtics about just do it like me. It's like, hey man, you're Bill Russell. I can't do that stuff. Teach me how to do this from a technical aspect and teach me how to be a better basketball player, knowing I'm never going to be Bill Russell because who the hell is? And I think Murray, in his first opportunity, displayed that he's going to be that guy. He's going to try to teach them the fundamentals and make them the best versions of themselves. And yeah, it's going to help tremendously that he has his track record. It's also going to help tremendously that he's a handsome man. I had this joke, Colin. I don't know if I told you this, but there are two men in college football for which polos were meant to be worn. One of them is Scott Frost. The other one is DeMarco Murray. Because my man looked real good up there. And, Lincoln made that point. He's like, now there's no question about who the best athlete on our staff is. So those were the things that stuck out to me about his press conference. Really good stuff.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, I immediately hit the gym after going to that presser, I should know. I had to pump a little bit after that one. But I wanted to further something, too, that you said. I thought it was a good point. DeMarco Murray says, look, what I accomplished in the NFL or in the Crimson and Cream is not an easy recruiting tactic, let alone the reason why I got this job. And it further encourages me that he's walking into this position without that being his basis of knowledge or reasoning why. Because then you look at the head coach and he was asked, look, when you went into the interview with DeMarco Murray, I mean, how much did you factor in what he could bring to the program in terms of familiarity or past experience in college or in the NFL? And he said, not one bit. Lincoln Riley was honest. He said, look, when DeMarco came here, I didn't really know him that much. And so I went into the interview saying, okay, I'm going to evaluate this guy just point blank. I don't know him. He's a first-year coach. He has to prove to me that he will earn this spot. And apparently, Lincoln Riley said it, in the first 10 minutes or so, he felt that both DeMarco Murray and Jamar Cain were the guys for their respective positions. That, to me, should really stand out because, we can't touch on it enough. DeMarco's only been in the college coaching world, let alone the entire coaching realm, for a season at Arizona. And Arizona ain't exactly a ball-out program. So I love the fact that DeMarco was able to go into this interview and prove to one of the best offensive minds in all of football, period, that he deserved to, as he put it, come home. Even though he's from Las Vegas, it's very clear to me that despite being such a connected member of the Oklahoma program and then being such an impactful presence at a franchise that has plenty of pull in this area, being the Dallas Cowboys, he still earns this right because of who he is as an individual, not because of who he was in his prior past. So I'm very encouraged by the hire. I think it was the right move, and I really like what all three had to say come that presser, and I can't wait to see the impact that they have on this program.
You touched on how Riley decided that Jamar Cain and DeMarco Murray were the right guys to fill the voids for the staff, right? I thought we got some insight into how Riley goes about his process, and it's not unlike how he's a play caller, which is to say instinct. And I err on the side of analytics more often than not because math is undefeated. But there is something to be said about I know what I know. I know that this is going to work. I know that this is not going to work. And him telling us all, look, I got a pretty quick trigger about this stuff. I know what I'm looking for. I narrow the field really quick. And when I know, I know. And let's go with that. And he had some simple criteria, quite honestly. And a lot of the work is already done. What's his track record? You know, what he says about quarterbacks and recruiting them is, did they win? Because that's the only thing that really matters. All that other stuff, it factors in. But was he a winner? Because if he lost a bunch of games, probably can't play here. He looked at Jamar Cain and said, everywhere that guy has gone, he's produced talent, and they've won. They've been a great defense. DeMarco, he's taken more of a chance on what he's done in the interview process and what Sumlin had to say about him, quite frankly, because I'm sure Riley could call up Kevin and have a frank conversation about his guy, and Sumlin was already out in front of everybody saying, no, I don't expect DeMarco to even be at Oklahoma for very long because he's just that talented. And knowing what he was able to do as a coordinator at Oklahoma, what he was able to do as a head coach at A&M, and what he's trying to build at Arizona, I'm going to take that into account. But Riley, at 36 years old, being decisive, knowing what he's looking for, taking into account his chemistry with the staff, and then what I love the most, does he have something to prove? Does he have something he's chasing? And Riley pointed it out. I still think I have something to prove like the day I got into coaching. And there's maybe 6, 7 coaches that are in college football today who shouldn't have a damn thing to prove left. He's one of them. But he wakes up every morning chasing something. Right now, we'll call it a national title. But once he gets there, he'll celebrate for a second. It'll be brought up as a way for him to shut down any other conversation whenever he needs to. He just flexes that ring. But he's got to start chasing something else because that's how he's built. And he needs all 10 of his assistants to be built much the same way.